être dit, pas de plan B, car pas de planète B. Voyons donc sur la planète A, la seule et l'unique, tout au moins dans le système solaire, où on en est du développement des énergies renouvelables, quels sont les pays les plus avancés, quels sont les pays où leur rentabilité ne fait plus débat. Pour répondre à ces quelques questions, je vais appeler Adnan Amin, qui est directeur général de l'IRENA, l'Agence internationale des énergies renouvelables, dont le siège est à Abu Dhabi, aux Émirats arabes unis, depuis 2009. Et je vais appeler également Michael Liebrecht, directeur général du Bloomberg New Energy Finance, premier fournisseur d'informations et d'études aux investisseurs et aux décideurs qui travaillent sur les projets énergie propre et les marchés bas carbone. Monsieur Amin.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to be here at this very important event, and I'd like to thank Jean-Louis Ball for his very kind invitation to be among all these visionaries and leaders who are talking about a sustainable future for our Earth. You'll be relieved to know there will be no slides, so I'll just share some thoughts with you. But let me start by saying I still well recall when France won the opportunity to be the president of the COP21. Because this, make no mistake, is going to be a decisive meeting for the global conversation on climate and how we assure sustainability in the future. I spoke to many countries, and there were two reactions. The first reaction was relief that they did not have to do it. A country like France took the responsibility. But the second was curiosity. How is France going to take this forward? And I think we are beginning to see part of that answer in our discussion today. Focus on the positive, practical solutions that already exist and find international cooperation that helps us to take them forward. But this has to be done through leadership and diplomacy. It's a very difficult problem that we are attacking. But we know that French civilization invented the concept of diplomacy. Even those who are very poor in French like me know all the diplomatic terms in the French language. So we're relying on you to bring this genius of diplomacy, of international solidarity and leadership to come and shepherd a positive solution in December. And in this regard, I'd like to assure you, you have many allies around the world, not least of us, my organization, the International Renewable Energy Agency. IRENA is probably the youngest international organization in the world, but it is the fastest growing, both in terms of its membership, in terms of its programmatic reach, and in the sophistication of the knowledge products related to renewable energy that it's producing. Our findings over the past few years, which have been taken note of in governments and energy markets around the world, make clear the fundamental point that's germane to our discussion today, that the decarbonization of energy production by 2030 is possible through renewable energy as a major component of any climate strategy. And I think that is the message that has been coming through all morning. The production and use of energy, especially conventional energy, accounts for nearly 80% of global carbon emissions. By increasing energy efficiency and scaling up investment in renewables, we can significantly reduce energy industry emissions. The technology to make this happen is available today. This technology is affordable, and we have hard evidence that the renewable energy transition is viable right now and has already begun. Positive trends in the competitiveness of renewables can be seen worldwide. We are increasingly seeing renewable energy featuring in national climate action plans and strategies. For example, the new energy transition bill here in France, which targets an increase in the proportion of renewables in France's energy mix to 32% by 2030 and is in line with the EU's targets, pledges to cut CO2 emissions fourfold by 2050 compared with 2012. And we would really like to congratulate France and especially Ms. Ségolène Royal on the bill's approval in the lower house, and we are watching its progress keenly. Similar to this approach, 144 countries around the world have already instituted renewable energy targets like this. We have goalposts in view. However, despite this, if we continue our current trajectory, we will not come close to global energy decarbonization. The challenge is, how can we do more as a global community for the energy sector transformation to happen at the scale and speed necessary to keep global temperatures below the 2-degree target that we have adopted? This is the problem we urgently need to solve this year. According to the IPCC's latest report, and we heard from Rajendra Pachauri earlier, atmospheric emissions are at their highest levels in over 800 years. These need to fall by 40 to 70% by 2030 if we are to stay below 2 degrees. Direct CO2 emissions from the energy supply sector are projected to double or even triple by 2050 compared to the level of 2010, unless we can significantly reduce energy intensity in the global economy. We know that the success of December's climate conference in Paris will lie in bringing to the fore opportunities to address climate change and the impact of rising emissions on our climate. As we prepare to convene here in Paris at the end of the year, I would like to propose to you 3 steps for accelerating the energy mix decarbonization through renewable energy. First, we need to bring visibility to the opportunities that exist right now in renewables. These opportunities are many, and they are multiplying. IRENA's recent costing report, which has been widely quoted around the world since we released it in December, clearly establishes that renewables are now affordable. Solar PV panel costs have dropped by around 75% globally from 2009 to 2014. The cost of wind turbines fell by about 30% in the same period. What's more, renewables are now competitive with conventional energy technologies. Onshore wind is now one of the most competitive sources available, with some projects delivering electricity for as little as $0.05 per kilowatt hour. Some utility-scale solar PV projects are now regularly delivering electricity for just $0.08 per kilowatt hour without financial support. This is very important, without subsidies. While fossil power plants cost between $0.07 and $0.19 per kilowatt hour, including externalities. Renewables are also available. Investment in renewables rose from $55 billion in 2004 to more than $260 billion in 2014. These are Michael's numbers. He has the best numbers in the world on investment in renewables, and he'll talk more about that issue. It has exceeded investment in new fossil-based power generation capacity for 3 years running. Private finance sources are opening up. Products are increasingly sophisticated and increasingly widely available to investors. Also, deployment is becoming widespread. More than 100 gigawatts of new renewables capacity have been added every year for the past 3 years, most of this in developing countries. We are likely to see this trend expand as ambitious plans take root in fast-growing emerging economies in every continent. India has targeted bringing a massive 100 gigawatts of solar capacity online by 2022, up from just the 3 gigawatts currently in place. 625 megawatts of solar were installed in Latin America in 2014, and just last week, Rwanda brought 8.5 gigawatts online as the first utility-scale solar project in East Africa. This is the signpost to the future. The renewable sector has also become a major employer. In 2013, it supported around 6.5 million jobs directly and indirectly. This is a clear avenue towards economic growth and employment generation, and if the renewable share of the global energy mix is doubled by 2030, as we project, we estimate that there will be over 16 million additional direct jobs created in that time. At a time of economic stagnation and jobless growth, this is a possibility for governments to contemplate. The other opportunities are well known: improved air quality, improved energy security, improved energy access, increased social and economic resilience. These opportunities are now too good for nations to continue to ignore. The second broad cluster of proposals is that along with promoting these opportunities, we need to shift the mindset of our societies and among our decision makers from one in which action on climate change is seen as somehow negative to growth and development. We need to shift this to one that highlights the positive opportunities that exist. I think this approach is at the heart of the positive agenda positive, that the French government has proposed for this year's conference, and I could not be in more agreement. In the face of those who oppose a global energy transformation, we have to spread a positive message on the outlook for decarbonization through renewables, and clearly and more widely than it has been done up to date. We need the world's media not to ignore declining renewable technology prices in favor of talking about declining oil prices. The world needs to know that clean energy will create jobs, improve the environment, and provide extensive room for innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, in my country, in Kenya, we have a saying that every problem is an opportunity to find a solution. Climate change should not be taken by us as an excuse to self-desperation. Pictures of refugees, disasters, floods, but rather we roll up our sleeves and find the solutions, and many of those solutions are in the transformation of our energy systems. Thirdly, we cannot only make renewables more acceptable to energy consumers. We must provide bold price signals to move policymakers, businesses, investors, civil society, and all other relevant stakeholders collectively towards a low-carbon future. As part of these efforts, we should be considering, or in some cases reconsidering, the issue of the carbon price. If we take the external cost of CO2 emissions into account, along with the cost of ill health and environmental degradation, we estimate that switching to renewable energy would save us up to $740 billion per year by 2030. But our energy markets are distorted because we don't recompense emissions in our business-as-usual scenario. Taxing per capita pollution and emissions will make renewables the most cost-effective energy source in most markets around the world. If these steps are followed, we stand a chance of encouraging the political will for action and achieving real results to benefit our social and economic development and prevent the most serious impacts of energy use on our climate. It is a long road to the global decarbonization of the energy industry by 2030. COP21 will be one of the many important stops on the way. how do we make it a meaningful one? We capture the positive momentum generated by the evidence we have that adopting renewables can address climate change. Let us remind ourselves that we have just lived through the world's hottest year on record. Annual CO2 emissions continue to rise. They reached 36 billion tons in 2013 and are expected to have reached 40 billion by 2014. But our findings present good news, and I want to outline some major findings relating to decarbonization from IRENA's REMAP 2030 report, which studied 26 countries around the world that account for 75% of energy consumption in terms of whether we can double deployment of renewable energy by 2030. By deploying all the REMAP options that we looked at, which are assumed to be carbon neutral, we have found that in those 26 countries, 6.2 billion tons of CO2 can be saved by 2030 compared with business as usual scenarios. This is equivalent to 8.6 billion tons worldwide. When all REMAP options are deployed worldwide, emissions would be around 32.8 billion tons by 2030. However, the REMAP 2030 analysis also considers early retirement of conventional energy facilities and technology innovation and breakthroughs. These measures will require some greater efforts in societal shift and in innovation to what we see today, but they, together with energy efficiency measures, and it's very important to recognize the importance of energy efficiency, would reduce global CO2 emissions to around 22.5 billion tons by 2030. According to our friends in the International Energy Agency around the corner, this is enough to keep temperatures below 2 degrees centigrade. And we can make it happen. These are signals that we can send across the world to accelerate the momentum that is carrying the global shift towards renewables, in time for the discussion here in Paris in December to make a real difference. But governments and organizations like IRENA cannot maintain this momentum alone. We need to bring everyone on board, and to do this, we must ensure that COP21 is not just a bump in the road, but an important and defining event in the unfolding energy revolution. Finally, let me reiterate our full commitment to supporting France in this extremely important endeavor for the future. We are already engaged in discussions on an initiative to dedicate time during the COP21 conference specifically to renewable energy, which we are discussing with Jean-Louis Ball and others in the French government. But we will do whatever it takes to ensure that France succeeds in its presidency. Thank you very much.